Check that you have all of your patterns. Front side, front center, back center, back side, sleeve, front skirt and back skirt. On the front center and front side, mark out the notches. Then sew them together with a 1 cm seam allowance. On the back side, mark out the notch. Then sew together with the back center with a 1 cm seam allowance. Sew the front and back together along the side seam with a 1 cm seam allowance. On the sleeve panel, mark out the notches. Sew 2 rows of gathering stitch along the top and bottom. Fold the sleeve and sew along the side seam with a 1 cm seam allowance. Measure out a piece of elastic band suitable for your bicep. Secure both ends together, forming a circle. Using the gathering stitch from before, gently pull and gather the sleeve hem to match the circumference of the elastic band. Sew the elastic band to the sleeve hem. Place the elastic close to the fabric edge. Then with a zigzag stitch, sew onto the elastic. Don't stretch the elastic while sewing. Next, fold over the elastic, then change to a straight stitch and top stitch. Sew close to the edge of the fabric, not close to the folded edge. Once again, you do not need to stretch the elastic band while sewing. On the front and back top, without interfacing, mark out the sewing lines. Sew the sleeve and the top together along the armhole with a 1 cm seam allowance. Make sure to match the notch on the sleeve to the sewing line on the top, as well as the side seams. Measure out a length of elastic suitable for your shoulder. Using the stitch that we've sewn on before, gently gather the sleeve crown to match the length of the elastic band. Then sew the sleeve crown to the elastic band. Place the elastic band close to the edge of the fabric and then sew them together with a zigzag stitch. Fold over the elastic band. Change your stitch to a straight stitch and then top stitch close to the edge of the fabric instead of the folded edge. Gently push away the sleeve so that the armhole stitch is visible. Taking the top panel with interfacing, align them up and secure with a pin, making sure to always push the sleeve panel away. Sew the panels together with a 1 cm seam allowance along the armhole. Grab a pair of scissors and snip into the seam allowances to reduce tension. Push away the sleeve panel. Mark out the notch along the center front. Then sew from the armhole down along the center front with a 1 cm seam allowance. Push away the sleeve panel. Then sew from the armhole towards the center back, stopping exactly at the notch. Turn inside out and check. Look for any mistakes where the sleeve begins from the bodice. If there are any gaps or fabric is puckering, go ahead and make the necessary corrections. Grab a pair of scissors and trim into the seam allowances to reduce tension and bulk. Turn it inside out and iron well. Repeat the steps for the other side of the front top. Sew the front skirt and the back skirt together along the side seams with a 1 cm seam allowance. On the front skirt, mark out the center front. Sew the completed top and sleeve panels to the skirt. Sew the outer top panel, the one without interfacing, by pushing away the inner top panel. Align it up to the center front. You'll sew them together with a 1 cm seam allowance. Repeat this step for the other top panel. Pushing away the inner top panel, position it along the center front and sew them together with a 1 cm seam allowance. Install the zipper along the center back. First, push away the inner panel. Measure 1 cm from the top. Make a mark. Sew the zip to the center back with a 1.5 cm seam allowance. To finish up the top of the zip, flip the inner panel down. Align up the corners and sew a horizontal line across to finish up the stitch with a 1 cm seam allowance. Then sewing on the outside of the zip, sew a vertical line down with a 1 cm seam allowance. Once both sides are completed, turn it inside out to check that the zip has been sewn on properly. Grab a pair of scissors and trim into the seam allowances to reduce the bulk. This step is optional if you wish to seal the inner panel down. To do so, sew in the ditch from the right side of the cloth, from one end all the way to the other. Sew up the rest of the center back along the skirt with a 1.5 cm seam allowance. At the bottom of the dress, fold up the hem by 1.5 cm and iron well. Then top stitch 1 cm from the folded edge. Following the markings on the paper pattern, install the eyelet along the center front. Add a ribbon and lace it up. And there you have it. Your dress is completed.